Further up and further in, deep Christianity in Narnia. What I would like to do, as far as my time permits, is to go through all the 7 books. Now, I know that I'm not going to have time to do justice to that, so at some point I'll probably cut to the chase, which will mean cutting to the last battle. So I'm not sure how much of the silver chair we'll get to, but we'll do what we can. So the other thing, just to start with controversy, because we were at dinner, and I made some good new friends at dinner, Andrew, which is one of the wonderful things about this. I quoted one of my favourite lines from Chesterton's autobiography, when he spoke of his relationship with his brother, and this is something was certainly that Lewis and Tolkien would very much be in tune with. He says of his relationship with his brother, we were always arguing, but we never quarrelled. So the Christian men, Christian women should always be looking for a good argument, but they should never quarrel. So that being so, I'm going to begin by looking for an argument here, because, of course, the first controversy is in what order am I going to actually cover the Narnia books? The order in which they were written, or the order in which they're sort of generally sold these days? I'm a heretic on both fronts, because when I first read them to my daughter, we started with The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, and then we went to The Magician's Nephew. So, I'm a law unto myself anyway, so be warned. I'm actually going to go through from Alpha to Omega. Okay, so I'm going to begin with Genesis and end with Revelations, which means I'm going to begin with The Magician's Nephew. So those of you that are very infuriated by that, then it's time for a good argument, but wait till the Q&A, okay? So in The Magician's Nephew, and I think it's probably my second favourite of the Narnia books after The Last Battle, we have lots of things going on, which shows some of Lewis's major preoccupations. One of which is scientism. I know I made a new friend at dinner who is a scientist, a PhD in physics, and he's working as a scientist now. So we spoke to each other for 15 minutes, and neither of us understood a single word anybody was saying. He spoke in equations. It's no good to me. But there's a big difference, of course, between science, which is good, and scientism, which is not good. So scientism can perhaps be described as making of science an idol or a religion where you believe that the physical sciences have the answers to all the problems. And this was something that Lewis was battling against. You see him battling against it in books such as That Hideous Strength. But the first person who suffers from scientism in the Chronicles of Narnia is Uncle Andrew. And, we know that what Lewis does is connect scientism with the demonic. So the connection between scientism, medieval alchemy, and the desire for the elixir of life, for immortality, for the philosopher's stone to make you very rich. That's the way the pharmaceutical industry still makes its money today. So he does that because who is Wicked Uncle Andrew's godmother? Well, it's Mrs. Le Fay, making the connection with the Arthurian legends and the sorceress Morgan Le Fay. So there's a demonic dimension to who Uncle Andrew is. And he has this wonderful line, which is a typical demonic line because it's true, but it's only half true. And a half-truth is often worse than a lie. There's something honest about a lie. There's nothing honest about a half-truth. He says, no great wisdom can be reached without sacrifice. You think, well, that makes sense. Uncle Andrew is saying it, but what he's saying is he's going to sacrifice others. Because as a scientist, he has the right to have guinea pigs. Not just the poor guinea pig that was the first victim of the experiment, but human guinea pigs. So what sort of sacrifice? Do we sacrifice ourselves for others? Or do we sacrifice others to ourselves? And this is exactly what's going on in our society now. And indeed, I would say it's what's going on in our own hearts. So Thomas Aquinas makes a distinction between scientia and curiositas. So scientia is knowledge. And desiring a knowledge of the truth as a means of understanding the cosmos is a good thing. Desiring a knowledge of the truth is a good thing. But having a curiosity about things, especially if the motivation for that curiosity is pride, is not a good thing. In fact, a sinful thing. So one consequence, of course, of pursuing curiositas instead of scientia is the discovery in The Magician's Nephew by Jadis, the White Witch, of the deplorable word. This word is so powerful and so wicked and so demonic that if it's uttered in a certain way with the right rituals and incantations, the deplorable word will destroy everything. Of course, Lewis is a good theologian. In the beginning was the Word. In the end is the anti-word. That which annihilates instead of creating. And of course, Tolkien and Lewis are always talking about applicability. What's going on in the story is applicable to the world beyond the story. And he's writing this, of course, in the shadow of the mushroom clouds over Hiroshima and Nagasaki. He's writing in the midst of the chill of the Cold War, whereas human curiosity had actually discovered the deplorable word. Someone in a high place of command only has to utter the deplorable word and the button is pushed. We're there. And we're still there, by the way. We've sort of been lulled into a false sense of security because it hasn't happened. But the weapons haven't disappeared. And against that deplorable word, that anti-word, that demonic antichrist, we have Aslan. And we have the creation of Narnia with Aslan's song. And one of many parallels between the work of Tolkien and Lewis. I'm not going to say too much about that here, apart from the time factor. I'm actually leading a breakout session tomorrow morning on when two worlds collude. You've got to love a bad pun. When two worlds collude, Narnia and Middle-earth. So I'm going to talk about that more tomorrow. But of course, there's an applicability in all of this. And there's a parallel between Tolkien and Lewis's vision of the cosmos being created through a work of art. We just had two beautiful songs here. That God creates with beauty and with love. And he sings Narnia into being. And then there's some really deep theology. Because he says, Narnia, Narnia, Narnia. Awake, love, think, speak. Now, when Lewis is writing, you pay attention. Don't just gloss over those words and go to the next sentence and get on with the story. You're missing something profound here. First of all, several places in the Chronicles of Narnia, words are repeated 3 times, evocative of the Trinity. Narnia, Narnia, Narnia. Awake. B. But then, love, think, speak. The great Greek philosophers who were prefiguring Christianity. We need to remember, by the way, that Plato and Aristotle were not contradicted by the great Christian philosophers. They were baptized by them. So St. Augustine baptizes Plato and Thomas Aquinas baptizes Aristotle. So they talked about the good, the true, and the beautiful. And how those 3 things, by the way, although God had not revealed himself as the Trinity, are Trinitarian. They are inseparable. That which is good is always true and beautiful. That which is true is always good and beautiful. That which is beautiful is always true and good. I see in the words of Christ, when he says, I am the way, the truth, and the life, he is saying, I am the good, the true, and the beautiful. Because the way of goodness is love, the way of truth is reason, and the way of beauty is life. I am the way, the truth, and the life. Aslan, love the way. Think the truth. Speak life. Profound Trinitarian philosophy and theology in the 3 words or 4 words, well, actually 7 words, Narnia, 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 awake, but love, think, speak. And at the end of the magician's nephew, Diggory, whose own curiositas, as opposed to scientia, when he rang the bell and brought about the bringing of evil into Narnia at its very creation, because of his curiositas in another world, he's tested with curiositas, because Jadis, the witch, the satanic figure at the end, when he's in the garden, when Diggory's in the garden, and he's been told to pick an apple but don't eat it by Aslan. First of all, he has permission to pick the apple. The witch doesn't. The witch is a thief. And by the way, God doesn't create evil things. There's nothing wicked in the apple in the garden. God only creates good things. The wickedness is in the plucking of it, which is an act of pride and disobedience. So Diggory has permission, and then the demonic figure says, eat it. If you eat it, everything will be put right. You have no worries. He's tempted, but he overcomes his curiositas. So at the end, we see that divine symmetry is that Diggory, as with Edmund in Lion, Witch and Wardrobe, has a profound conversion, passes the test. Okay, the Lion, Witch and Wardrobe, the most famous, of course. What's in a name? Well, if you're a writer, and you're a writer who's an expert in medieval and Renaissance literature, early modern literature, you know there's a lot in a name because a lot of symbolism going on. So Lucy is the seer, all right? She's the one who sees. She's the one that sees the magic of the wardrobe. She's the first one to see Narnia. And Saint Lucy is the patron saint of the blind. In praying to her, your blindness, whether it's spiritual or physical, can be healed. Now, I don't know to what extent Lewis had a devotion to St. Lucy, but we do know that he loved the Divine Comedy by Dante. And in the Divine Comedy, it's the Blessed Virgin gives St. Lucy the commandment to get Beatrice, to get Virgil, to save Dante from the dark wood. Why? Because Dante is blind. Blinded by his sins, and he can't see. So the patron saint of the blind is the appropriate person to begin that process of Dante's healing. So the choice of the name of Lucy. Edmund. If I had more time, because it's much more fun to be in a classroom than giving a talk, I'd ask for, where's the connection with Edmund? And I'm sure some of you would know, but asking questions takes too long, and I'm going to have to leave things out already. But Edmund, of course, is a cynic and a traitor, and he betrays his own brother. Reminds me, at least, of King Lear, with the character of Edmund in King Lear, who is the traitor who betrays his brother. Peter, of course, the first of the apostles. That's the role he plays within the Narnia Chronicles. And then we have the difference between deep magic and deeper magic. Now, the deep magic from the dawn of time, the devil understands. The white witch gets it. The deep magic from the dawn of time is justice. And we must have justice. And the devil knows that justice must be done. And when it's suggested by Susan that perhaps Aslan could turn a blind eye in this one case to justice, he growls rather menacingly. He's not a tame lion, but he does obey his own laws. Break the deep magic from the dawn of time. No, justice must be done. But of course, the devil doesn't know the deeper magic that existed before the dawn of time. In other words, in eternity, in the Godhead, because even the devil is a creature. Because in eternity is the Trinity. And within the Trinity, no justice is necessary because no injustice is possible. But what there is in the Trinity is the free exchange of love. And the outpouring of that love when justice is necessary, in other words, with creatures, is called mercy. So the deeper magic from before the dawn of time is the love of God poured out in mercy on wicked sinners who deserve worse. And the devil does not understand that. The devil is a judge. We have, of course, when following his resurrection, following Aslan's resurrection, when he descends into the witch's castle and raises all of the statues to life, a vision of Christ's descent into limbo, following his resurrection and the release of the souls. We can call it hell, call it limbo, we can call it what we like, right? But the souls that were trapped until the redemption came. And of course, that story also ends with a conversion. Diggory's in The Magician's Nephew, Lion, Witch and Wardrobe, it's Edmund's conversion. And Edmund, as a sort of convert, sinner, is a recurring feature of his role in the rest of the books, as we shall see. Okay, the horse and his boy. The first thing I want to address here is those people that attack C.S. Lewis. Those that are seeking not to quarrel with, so not to argue with him, but to quarrel with him. And one of the accusations about the horse and his boy is of its being racist. Because it's set in Calamine. The Calamines are Arabic people, whereas, of course, the people from Narnia are Europeans. What we have to understand here is what Lewis is doing is drawing on all of the cauldron of story. Tolkien used to talk about cauldron of story. They're steeped in medieval literature where the enemy, which was a dangerous enemy to the south, was Islam. South of the Mediterranean. And in 732, an Islamic army, as early as 732, by the way, 732 AD, an Islamic army had invaded all the way up into the north of France until defeated at the Battle of Tours. If that battle had not been won, Europe would be Muslim. It would not be Christian. In 1529, the Islamic troops, the Turkish Empire, the Ottoman Empire, advanced as far as Vienna, the capital of the Holy Roman Empire. If they had taken Vienna, Christian Europe may well have fallen, and Europe would not be a Christian continent, it would be an Islamic continent. In 1571, the Battle of Lepanto, a Muslim fleet was defeated by a Christian fleet. If it hadn't been, it's very possible St. Peter's in Rome would now be a mosque like Sophia Hagia in Istanbul, or Constantinople if you prefer. And as late as 1683, not that long ago, again, the Ottoman Turks advanced as far as Vienna, and Vienna was actually liberated by a Polish general. So this was part of the Christian imagination of this very powerful and real enemy to the south. And if you read The Everlasting Man by Chesterton, he's also added to that the enemy of the Roman Empire, which was Carthage, which actually practiced child sacrifice, which is also practiced by the Calamans. So that's the call on the story. And it has nothing to do with race. And I'll tell you why, and I now speak, those of you that were here, I'm a convert to Christianity from being a neo-Nazi. I think I know a bit about racism. And I know what racists think. And the worst thing for a racist is a mixed marriage. where the two different races get together. That's exactly what happens in The Horse and His Boy. Right? The dark-skinned Aravis and the white-skinned Shasta live happily ever after. That is not the work of a racist. It's a work that makes racists mad. The other thing about it is anti-imperialism, because we forget that Calamene's not this sort of persecuted country. This is a powerful empire. Narnia is the little small country on the edge of it that this Calamene empire wants to swallow up. It's a work of anti-imperialism. And within it as well, we have this wonderful scene between Aravis and Lazareline, her friend, who's completely besotted with luxury and comfort. She basically worships Mammon instead of Aslan. And there's a wonderful, that in Latin, the word light is lux, where we get Lucy from, lux, L-U-X, but the word luxury, luxus, right? Play on words between the light. So Aravis is following lux, not L-O-O-K-S, by the way. Lazareline is following that sort of lux. Lux, L-U-X, as opposed to luxus, luxury. That she's not ever going to take up her cross. And again, within the Chronicles of Narnia, that Aslan often signs the work, or should we say Lewis signs the work in Aslan's name. Aslan gives his own signature. So in The Horse and His Boy, when Shasta asks him, "Who are you?" to Aslan, he says, "Myself, myself, myself," which is, if you prefer, I am. I am. I am. God himself. So, okay, Prince Caspian. And again, I'm always looking, I'm a literature person, and I'm looking for intertextuality, how one work of literature is informed by other works of literature. So I made suggestions of it perhaps with Lucy and Dante's Divine Comedy and Edmund and King Lear. But there's lots of it, I think, in Prince Caspian. So Miraz, the King Miraz, he's not technically the king. He's known as the Lord Protector. That's the official name. Now, in English history, only two people have had that title. Richard III, and those of you who know your Shakespeare will know enough about him, at least Shakespeare's depiction of him. I know people who say it's not fair on the real Richard III, but that's a different discussion. The Shakespeare's Richard III and Oliver Cromwell. Again, the dictator, and Lewis is a member of the Church of England, and Oliver Cromwell was an enemy of the Church of England, and Lewis is also an Irishman, and Oliver Cromwell did a lot of wicked things to the Irish. So, he's making a connection in the Lord Protector in Narnia to other Lord Protectors in English history, Richard III and Oliver Cromwell. But there's also another obvious connection to another Shakespeare play, because Prince Caspian's uncle is not the true king. He's the uncle of the true king and a usurper. Has to remind us of King Claudius in Hamlet. So when Prince Caspian said, "Well, he wouldn't kill me, would he?" And to be it, "He murdered your father." And in the same work again, Lucy, because remember in that book, in Prince Caspian, the children can't see Aslan. He's there, but they can't see him. The first person to see him is Lucy, right? The seer, the one who sees. But the second person to see is Edmund, because Edmund's the repentant sinner. And he knows that he was wrong before, and although he can't see Aslan, he's not prepared to say it's untrue. Because he said that once before, and when he said it before, it was a lie. So he's given the gift of sight, grace, because of his faith in Lucy's faith. And then Peter, and then Susan. And again, that plays itself out as well in the series. And this is played out also when Lucy says, well, they will be able to see you eventually, won't they? And Aslan says, it depends. In other words, the ability to see God, the ability to have a relationship with God in faith through grace depends. Because God is not a rapist. It's a love affair. And both parties in that love affair have to want it. It depends. And then when Aslan asked, do you feel worthy to be king of Narnia? And Castamere says, no, I don't. And Aslan, I'm paraphrasing now, he said, well, if you did, you wouldn't be. Now, if you felt yourself worthy, you would not be worthy. And there's a line, there's a saying in Latin that said in the Mass, or it's translated in English, Domine non sum dignus, Lord, I am not worthy. And that really is the beginning of wisdom in political philosophy. That the ruler has to be a servant. And if the ruler wants to rule, he should not be allowed to do so. It's more easier said than done, of course. But Aslan says in this profound Christian philosophy that Prince Casimir must rule under us, it's the royal we, and also the Trinity, if you like, under us and under the High King. In other words, the authentic government has to be under God. And if the government's not under God, it's not authentic government. But not just under God, but under the High King. In other words, under Peter. In other words, under tradition, under Christianity. And any government that's not going to be under God and under, if you like, orthodoxy is not an authentic government. All right. I'm doing quite well here, actually. I'm amazing myself. 5, The Voyage of the Dawn Treader. Now, it has one, in my humble opinion, one of the most delightful opening lines in all of literature. You know it. There was a boy whose name was Eustace Clarence Scrubb, and he almost deserved it. Brilliant! That's as good as it was the best of times at the worst of times. It's as good as that, but funnier. But of course, the key thing in that line, in that opening sentence, is the word almost. Because if you almost deserve it, you don't deserve it, right? In other words, he's behaving so badly that he does almost deserve it, but no one deserves that name, right? And of course, it's because he didn't have any choice in it. His parents chose the name. So really it's a judgment upon the parents. And in this book, I can't, there's a whole discourse of 2 pages about the importance of the mentioning of underwear in Lewis's work. Because we're given a description of the sort of parents that Eustace Clarence Scrubb has. We're told that they're vegetarians and they don't drink. But we're also told that they have this sort of strange fascination for underwear. Now, and I can imagine all sorts of weird sort of Freudian interpretations of that going on in the academy. But it's nothing to do with that. But you have to know something about Lewis's generation. Because George Bernard Shaw was basically an atheist and a Fabian socialist, so a soft Marxist, with Jaeger underwear. He actually wrote essays in defense of Jaeger underwear on the basis that, that any other fabric close to your skin was going to ruin your health. So Lewis throws this fact about underwear in as a joke. But the point is, again, intertextuality, but it's actually, it's now historical. Everybody knows he's talking about George Bernard Shaw, which means that Eustace Clarence Scrubb's parents are Shavians, followers of George Bernard Shaw, and therefore Fabians, i.e. communists. So yeah, again, a little bit of context brings things out. And of course, one consequence of that is that Eustace Clarence Scrubb, because of his appalling upbringing, almost deserves the name that's been given to him. But almost because the appalling upbringing is also not his fault. So the Voyage of the Dawn Treader in many ways is Eustace's pride to humility. The whole work, by the way, I'm going to test your Latin now. The whole work, the Voyage of the Dawn Treader, all of it, basically, is ad orientem. Do you know what ad orientem means? Towards the east, right? So the whole action, because they're going towards Aslan's country, which is in the east, where the sun rises, where the dawn begins, which is why throughout the whole history of Christendom, the traditional orientation of the building of churches was that the altar faced east. So the worshippers were facing east, awaiting the rising of the sun, S-O-N. So the whole of this work is ad orientem, face towards the east, face towards Aslan's country. It's also another wonderful example of Lewis's political incorrectness, because Gumpus talks about he's a follower of progress. He's a corrupt, horrible man, politician. And King Caspian says, well, progress comes in many different guises. If we see progress in an egg, we call it going rotten. And then we have, those of us that know Tolkien, know about in The Hobbit, it's all about the dragon sickness, and I'll say more about that on Sunday morning when I go further up and further into Middle-earth. But of course, in the Voyage of the Dawn Treader, we actually get the dragon sickness incarnated. Eustace is already a dragon before he gets what he doesn't want, but it's what he already is, which is a dragon. What's interesting, do we know who is it that first recognizes the dragon is Eustace? Do we know? Someone? Anyone? Andrew here says both of them. Well, it's not strictly true because we don't know, right? It could be either of them, right? Was it Lucy or was it Edmund? So Lewis is playing with this still about, who sees with eyes of faith, because to all intents and purposes, Eustace is a dragon. He looks like a dragon, smells like a dragon, right? Smokes like a dragon. He probably is a dragon, unless you can see further. Lucy sees further because she's the one who sees. But Lewis doesn't, he deliberately keeps it ambiguous. Who was it? No one really remembers now, he says, basically, whether it was Lucy or Edmund who first recognized the dragon as Eustace. Because Edmund, of course, is the sinner and the convert, and it takes one to know one, right? Edmund had been the dragon. He knows a dragon when he sees one, because he was one. And then at the end of it, I'm going to read this because I'll garble it otherwise. Towards the end of it, when they see Aslan as a lamb, all right, Agnus Dei, the Lamb of God, but he said, so Lucy says, well, the thing we won't be allowed to come back is we won't see you again. That's the worst thing. We won't see you again. But you shall meet me, dear one, said Aslan. Are you there too, sir? Said Edmund. I am, said Aslan. But there I have another name. You must learn to know me by that name. This was the very reason why you, and you who are reading the book, were brought to Narnia, that by knowing me here for a little, you may know me better there. All right, Silverchair's going to get short shrift again. Poor Silverchair, it happens every time I give the talk. There we go. Again, at the beginning of the Silverchair, if you remember, that Eustace is being bullied. And as they sort of go out, they say, how do they escape? Maybe we can escape into Narnia. And I think we should look to the east. Well, should we make spells? Oh, he wouldn't like that. I think we should just ask him. So again, a theology of prayer, right? We face towards the east and we beseech and we request. We don't demand or command, not for us to do that. And then after Eustace falls off the cliff, and it's largely Jill's fault, and Aslan's speaking to her, she doesn't understand, and she says, "Are you him?" And he replies, "I am." And he says to her, "Remember the signs." It's easy to remember when you're here in my presence, when you're in my own country. But when you're out there, in the darkness, in the shadowlands, it's been much more difficult to remember. Practice the signs every day. Say your prayers, go to church. And of course she doesn't. And she's tempted by comfort. Comfort is depicted in this book as a trap. You know, they're almost eaten because they're thinking of hot showers or hot baths. It's not showers, they don't have showers in Narnia. They're more civilized than that. They have a hot bath and good food and a warm bed. So Puddleglum's saying, "Yeah, but who are these people we're going to see, right? Can we trust them? Yeah, don't be so gloomy. Don't be so glum, Puddleglum." And of course, when they find themselves in the Underland, the witch's spell is broken because Puddleglum sacrifices himself. And he puts his foot in the flames. Nothing's better for breaking the spell of the devil than the smell of burnt marshwiggle. Bear that in mind, by the way, next time you're tempted, right? Probably someone should sell burnt marshwiggle. Yeah, we should. So it's the acceptance of suffering breaks the spell. And there's a wonderful novel by Maurice Baring, who was a great friend of Chesterton. He's a best-selling novelist between two world wars. And in one of those novels, there's a character in it, and he says, the acceptance of suffering, sorry, the exact quote is, the acceptance of sorrow is the meaning of life. When you understand that, you will understand everything. Not sorrow, not suffering, but the acceptance of suffering. Puddleglum gets it and saves them. There's lots of, I don't have time. The last battle, my favorite. Don't I to get down to 5 or 10 minutes. The two characters, what's in the name again? The two characters at the beginning, right? Shift the monkey, or Shift the ape, I should say. What's the difference between an ape and a monkey, right? Well, it used to annoy me about Curious George. My daughter used to watch Curious George when she was younger. And I keep calling him a monkey. He's not a monkey, he's an ape. Right, that's another matter. There's also, I think, VeggieTales song about that, for those of you. You can tell I spend most of my time in high culture. You can tell this. So we start off with Shift the ape and Puzzle the donkey. And they are named appropriately because Shift is a relativist. He shifts. He has no rock. He shifts depending upon what he's going to get out of it. Puzzle, on the other hand, is just puzzled. Understand what's going on, which is perfect for someone as malicious and clever as Shift, who uses this puzzled beast to do his dirty work. There's a big difference between wisdom and cleverness. Shift is clever, he's not wise. In fact, he's stupid. Puzzle, on the other hand, is not clever, but has, if you like, a very simple wisdom. He's good. His wisdom. And there's an old English word, silly. We hear that word silly, we think now if you're silly, then you're basically stupid, right? No, it didn't mean that. It meant you had a holy simplicity. And it can come in two different ways. It can come in Like our son who has Down syndrome and autism. He's silly, but he has a holy simplicity and teaches us. Someone said to me, there are two types of people in life. Most of us are here to learn, but some of us are here to teach. Children with Down syndrome are here to teach. Puzzle's here to teach. He's silly. And we should learn to treat Puzzle the way that Puzzle should be treated, and not the way that Shift treats him. Of course, Shift then invents this ecumenical God. All the gods are the same. Tash, Aslan, all the same. So we have this new hybrid god, Tashlan. But think about how demonic this is, because what's the difference between Aslan and Tash? We've seen it earlier in the Chronicles of Narnia. Aslan is a god who so loves the world that he lays down his own life for it. He shows us that love is the sacrifice of the self for others. Tash is a god of pride who demands the sacrifice of others to himself. They are complete opposites. They cannot go together. And the wise know that. Tash, in fact, is a proud god for proud people. Those who don't give themselves sacrificially to others, but those who sell their soul to the self and sacrifice others to it. And then we have a more great theology and doctrine with Emeth. The good Calaman, that to everyone's surprise, not least his, finds himself in Aslan's heaven. But I've never worshipped you. How can I be in your heaven? I've never worshipped you. Worshipper of Tash. And then Aslan says, insofar as you genuinely loved, I'm paraphrasing, insofar as you genuinely loved, you were worshipping me. Because Tash does not accept your love, even though you didn't know it. And this, of course, the technical term for this is baptism of desire. Because there's 3 types of baptism. Baptism by water, right? Sacramental baptism most of us go through. Baptism by blood, right? If you're martyred for the faith, you're baptized by your own blood, even if you weren't baptized in water prior to that. But also baptism by desire. In other words, if you had brought up in a culture where you never heard the word Jesus, so let's say the Amazon 300 years ago, well, it's not your fault. Is a loving God going to send you to hell for eternity for something you can't possibly have known anything about? Or for that matter, everybody who lived before the time of Christ. Which is why when Christ is resurrected, he descends into hell and liberates those people. It's a baptism of desire. But then you get stupid people. They're not silly, they're stupid. Who will say, and these are normally non-Christians or anti-Christians, who say the fact that Emeth is there in heaven means that Lewis is a universalist, that everybody is going to be saved. Well, that's not what's going on. In fact, what happens at the door, the gateway to his kingdom? Everybody has to look him in the eye. And those that hate him pass to the left, into his shadow, into darkness. Those who look him in the eye and love him, even if they're scared of him, enter on his right-hand side into the kingdom. So there's a judgment. So he's not a universalist. And I want to finish with a connection to Chesterton. Now, I'm a Christian under the grace of God, to God be the glory, but under the grace of God because of my discovering the works of G.K. Chesterton. And it's one thing, at least, I have in common with C.S. Lewis, because Lewis first read Chesterton in the trenches during World War I and fell in love with him, even though Lewis was an atheist at the time. Couldn't help loving Chesterton. He hit the nail on the head that what he loved about Chesterton ultimately was his goodness. And he says, even though I didn't want to be good myself, I still liked it and I saw it in others. In other words, we all love good people, even if we don't want to be good ourselves. And then in 1925, I think it was, he read, 1927, anyway, one or the other. He read The Everlasting Man by Chesterton. And in this book, it's a response by Chesterton to the scientistic approach to history, that we progress into a golden age in the future. And in H.G. Wells's book, the life of Christ had, a few paragraphs. In Chesterton's book, the first part begins with the man in the cave. First part of the book, the whole pre-Christian period. The second part of the book begins with the God in the cave, Bethlehem. And I think it's Lucy that says that in our world too once there was something in a stable that was bigger than the whole world. And I'm going to finish with not my words but Lewis's, because if of the Voyage of the Dawn Treader is one of the finest and funniest opening lines of all literature, the final few sentences of the last battle, some of the most beautiful in all literature. And I would say, by the way, if you want the really deep eschatological theology, obviously do read good theologians. I'm not saying that. Read as much as you can, that's good. But the astonishing thing about C.S. Lewis is that he can put profound eschatological theology into a children's book. It takes our breath away. And this is just the last few sentences, which is a perfect way of ending. And as he spoke, he no longer looked to them like a lion, but the things that began to happen after that were so great and beautiful that I cannot write them. And for us, this is the end of all the stories. And we can most truly say that they all lived happily ever after. But for them, it was only the beginning of the real story. All their life in this world and all their adventures in Narnia had only been the cover and the title page. Now, at last, they were beginning chapter 1 of the great story which no one on earth has read, which goes on forever, in which every chapter is better than the one before. Thank you. Thank you. Questions? We've got about 10 minutes for questions. Yeah, I only went over by 5 minutes, but we've got 10 minutes for questions if we have the hour.
Aslan's the god of time.
Sorry, I beg your pardon.
Will serve us. So,
sorry.
What questions do we have for Joseph?
Yeah.
The 1 minute version of my conversion story, a happily 1 minute version. Unfortunately, I don't think Becky has the book out there. Do you? I didn't see it. Race with the Devil. You have 2 copies. 2 copies. Price is going up as we speak. But the 1 minute version of my conversion story is that at the age of 15, back in England, my native England, I joined a neo-Nazi organisation. I was a radical for about 10 years, into my mid-20s. I edited 2 magazines. For editing one of those magazines, I was sentenced to prison twice for publishing material likely to incite racial hatred, and spent my 21st and 25th birthdays in prison. Between those 2 prison sentences, I fell in love with G.K. Chesterton. So whereas at the beginning of the first sentence, I was a political soldier and a political prisoner of war and was a fanatic, at the beginning of the second sentence, I thought, what am I doing here? I've been living a lie. I don't even believe the stuff I've been sent to prison for. And I started to pray for the first time in my life in prison. Started to go to church for the first time in my life in prison. Started to read some serious Christian literature for the first time in my life in prison. So that when I got out of prison, I turned my back on all of my friends, because that's all I knew, went to a different part of the country, started a new life, and 2 years afterwards was received into the church, and that was 1989 when I was 28 years old. So that's 1 minute version.
Something I've always wondered, and it sounds like maybe you would know, is who do you think C.S. Lewis recognized or related the most to as far as the characters? Because I always feel like great artists always leave their signature or their headshot somewhere in the painting, and I'm just wondering, I have this theory, I want to know what you think. Clarence Scrub, C.S., do you think that C.S. Lewis related, like, do you think he saw himself in that character? I want to know who you think he impersonated.
I think we've been very unfair on C.S. Lewis's parents if we think that, because. But yeah, I think that I don't actually personally see it in the Narnia stories. I'm willing for others that might see it otherwise. I think it's easier actually in the Lord of the Rings. I think Tolkien is more prone to putting himself in the story in some senses than Lewis is. Lewis puts Tolkien, of course, in his story. He's Ransom in the Ransom trilogy, or as Tolkien said, I see some of my ideas Lewisified in the character of Ransom. But I don't actually see a character in Narnia that comes to mind to me as someone that Lewis. I mean, yeah, I don't see it.
I would disagree.
Good.
I think that
Is this an argument or a quarrel, by the way?
no, it's an argument.
Oh, okay, good.
You and I never quarrel. But whoever wins the argument
Buys the beer.
No. Great, I'm buying the beer tonight. I think that there is an assonance to Eustace, Clarence Scrub, Clive, Staples, Lewis, but you also get this great hint, and I'm sure I'm stealing from our dear friend Paul Ford in his Companion to Narnia. What did Eustace like to do? He liked to pin bugs to cards. And Lewis was very interested for a period, as a young boy, you'll find it in Surprised by Joy, thing, right? And so I think that maybe he fears that he is as ugly as Eustace Clarence Scrub, but I think that he aspires to being Lucy. And if you read carefully, the narrator only speaks one time to one of the Pevensies, and it's in The Voyage of the Dawn Treader, where Lucy is speaking, and she said, "Oh, it would make you cry," when describing the end of the world. It would make you cry. And the narrator says, "Really? Why? Was it so sad?" said I. "Sad? No," said Lucy. But the narrator, the Lewisian character, speaks to Lucy. And so I think there's an aspirational and a dejectional element anyway. So,
You win the argument, mine's the pint of IPA, okay?
I'm always buying the beer for this one. Other questions?
Yeah, 5 more minutes, don't waste them.
It's interesting you mentioned the young Kelorman, because he came up in a conversation yesterday. A strong Christian friend and I attended a wonderful memorial service for a man who was grieved by his family. He was generous, kind-hearted, loving, the fabulous father, all of these. But we were in a synagogue. It was a Jewish service. And as we walked to our car, Teresa and I were like, wow, he had all these qualities that we aspire to as a Christian.
The appropriate reason, sorry.
The young Kelorman came up in our conversation like, is this the hope that we have?
Well, that's very appropriate, because Emeth is Hebrew, and it means faith.
No, truth.
All right. I need another pint. But actually, I'm going to look this up in here, actually, because it's in here, and I think that the actual word in the Hebrew as translated actually can mean both. But we can look that one. You might owe me another. You might owe me another pint.
Taking Hebrew in seminary right now.
Yeah, but
No,
listen.
I think it is truth.
All right.
But yeah.
By the way, so it's very appropriate because it's a Hebrew word, Emeth, and you're talking about someone in the synagogue. Very appropriate.
And you also might want to think of the parallel not only of the white Shasta marrying the Aravis so that they can go on continuing to argue. You think of another Middle Eastern descent person in C.S. Lewis's life. He married Joy Davidman, the Jew, so that they could go on continuing to argue as well. Yes, I saw. Yes. This side of the room, they're crushing you over here.
It's not necessarily a question form yet, but you left out Reepicheep, and he's my favorite.
I did leave out.
I just wanted to give you a chance to give your treatment of him.
Well, I love Reepicheep, but I'm not. I mean, yeah, I can say lots about Reepicheep. I don't know. You know, he embodies the chivalry of the Christian knight. He's the one that will go on to death for a vision of Aslan's country. In spite of anything else, he's small. He's like a hobbit. So it's the exaltation of the humble. So yeah, there's lots of good things in Reepicheep. You know, I've left loads out. I mean, it's all in this wonderful book here. I mean, you know,
it's truth.
it is truth.
Mm-hmm.
All right. That's fine.
No, it's
Listen, it's two.
Yeah.
It's 2 beers.
Olive, Tet, and
Tell you what, I'm being set up for the night here. Just get one more right, and I'll be good.
You mentioned in the Chronicles how he talked about the only proper form of government being one under God, and particularly Christian orthodoxy, which made me think of, I think it's Is Progress Possible, one of his essays, where he talks about a theocracy being the government that he loathes the most. So how are you reconciling that? I'm just curious about.
Well, of course, it depends what you mean by theocracy, because again,
Yeah.
and this is your opportunity to earn me another point by correcting my Greek, right? But you know, but theocracy technically means rule by God, and in that sense, of course, no way would Lewis think
Right.
that theocracy is the worst form of government.
Mm-hmm.
What he means is, of course, that if you get
Thus saith
the
the
government's
Lord.
being run by the Pharisees, right? And the hypocrites, that call themselves religious. No, but the point is that, and we go, because right back to ancient Greece with Antigone, right? If you know the play Antigone, and it's played out again in King Lear, and it's played out again in the play on Thomas More. Help me. Man for All Seasons. No, the point is that there are some things that transcend human law, right? And those divine things, which include religious worship, the man-made law has no say over whatsoever. And if laws are passed that make the practice of religion illegal, they are unjust and ultimately, in the eyes of God, illegal laws, which we actually have a duty to disobey and to become dissidents. So basically, when we say one nation under God and under tradition, means that no government can actually defy the goodness, truth, and beauty of Christian orthodoxy. And if it does so, it's an illegitimate government.
Thank you very much, Joseph Pierce.